Okay, we're going to get the show on the road. We want to try to keep on time for the session. First, I want to say good morning. Welcome to the first track session. This is track 2. So if anybody's, like they say on the planes, if you're not heading towards the right area, you can exit now. But this is track 2, architecting your disease community. It's sponsored by Malacroft, and we thank them. We also would like to thank Alliance RX Walgreens Prime for sponsoring the networking break that occurred. I'm Dave Caponera. I am the room host for this. We are live streaming this, so there are questions and answers that will come from the live stream, but also yourself. If you have questions and answers, we will take them live, but if you feel more comfortable doing your mobile app, so hopefully you've downloaded your mobile app, and if you look on that under this session, there is a place that you can type a question on that. I want to remind everybody to really try to use the mobile app. The Global Genes Group has done a great job at bringing that forward, and it's a really a good resource on that. Today we're going to hear from Dawn Ireland, President of CDH International, and Christina Gomez, Assistant Vice President of CCS Fundraising. This session is the Nonprofit 101, Launch and Governance of a Nonprofit. We'll explore the ins and outs of starting a nonprofit and offer guidance on how to manage its internal operations. We're going to let Dawn speak first, and then Christina will speak, and then we'll take questions at the end. Great. Dawn. I was supposed to advance that. Sorry, I was supposed to advance that.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me okay? I'm going to get down here with all of you so I can see the slides, and I'm going to just warn you ahead of time, I am not a formal speaker. I'm very casual and I'm very blunt. If you have any questions, hold them to the end. So my name is Dawn Ireland. I am a patient advocate. I am a parent of a child born with congenital diaphragmatic hernia, and I am the founder and president of CDH International. And our organization was founded in 1995. This is before the internet. And I started with another mom and a typewriter on my kitchen table at 22 years old, having no education in nonprofit management, no information, nowhere to go, no mentor, no large organization to turn to for information, not even a brochure. And I will be the first to tell you I had no idea what I was doing. And there are days that I still don't. But as you know, dealing with rare disease, that is just par for the course in our everyday lives. And starting a nonprofit for something rare, it is not an easy road. So I'm going to tell you the good side and the bad side, and I'm going to be very blunt on all of the parts of running a nonprofit organization, because I want you to have the information that I did not have when I started. So you want to start a charity. Well, what is your drive? Is it because you're a patient, or you're the parent of a patient, or you lost a loved one to a rare disease? That is why most of us start our charities, but is your focus your patient or yourself, or is it the overall community? And that is a very tough question that you need to ask yourself, because that navigates everything that you do with your charity. What do you have to offer the community? Do you have knowledge or insight or experience that puts you in a position to be able to lead others? Is there no leader for your rare disease? Are there other organizations? What are you bringing to the table that's going to help your community? And is there anyone else providing the service that you want to bring to the table? And that is a very serious question, more so than you think, because you know in rare disease there are limited funds, there's limited support, there are limited volunteers, it's small communities. So you don't want to compete with anyone, you want to bring something new to the table. And do you have enough support for this idea? So I'm going to tell you a quick little story here. When I started, I had no support. Literally one other mom who knew less than I did, because I was the one in the medical library looking everything up, trying to figure out what was going on with my son. And she's still a part of the organization today, but her son was born a month before mine. Between the two of us, we knew nothing. We literally knew nothing. And when I started the organization, I didn't have a pool of other families that were going to support this. My family had no idea what I was doing. They didn't know why I was doing this. I had a couple of doctors, but we didn't have a community that was able to help build and sustain a nonprofit. So I ended up doing that mostly by myself, which, looking back, I probably wouldn't have done if I knew what I was signing up for, with the amount of work and having a very disabled child at the time. And so you have to make sure that you have the support to start the organization, because it is a tremendous amount of work. And you have to weigh the pros and the cons for you personally before you start on this endeavor. Do you have experience running a business? Because as much as we don't want to say it, running a nonprofit is running a business. And if you don't know how to run a business, you're going to have a very hard time running a charity. Do you have a board of directors? Do you have a group of people who have business experience? Or are you looking at a board who's made up of moms and dads and grandparents and patients and other family members, or people who just want to help? Because those are the people who are going to help run your organization, and someone needs to know what to do. Following the laws. Christina's going to talk a lot more on this, so I'm just going to touch on it really quickly. Do you know what laws you need to follow? Have you done your research for your state, for your country? Are you going to be incorporated? Are you not going to be incorporated? And what services will you offer? What exactly is your community missing that they need that you want to provide? Is it research funding? Are you going to help navigate pharma? Are you looking for something to cure disease? Are you looking to put parents in touch with other parents, or patients in touch with other patients? Are you looking to raise awareness? What exactly is it that you want to do? That needs to become your mission. So you need to have a very clear and concise mission from day one of what you want to do, and keep that your focus. And you also need to come up with bylaws. Like I said, I'm going to let Christina talk more about legalities of starting a charity. Naming your charity. This deserves its whole slide. This is a big deal. When I started our organization, it was called CHAIRBS, the Association of Congenital Diaphragmatic Hernia Research, Advocacy, and Support. Big mistake. Big mistake. We renamed our organization last year to CDH International. Now I have to explain what CDH is, but that's okay. It's a conversation starter. But I'm not typing out that long name every time we do anything. And to make it more complicated, I put CHAIRBS all in caps, so everybody wanted to know what it stood for, and it stood for nothing. So I didn't think that through, because I was 22 years old. So don't make the same mistake I did. Think big. Think long term. Also, when I named our organization CHAIRBS, at the time, in the 90s, there was lots of cherubs and angels, and they were popular in TV shows everywhere. Did not foresee that 25 years later it would be offensive to some people. So you have to think long term. And think inclusive of the whole community. There are lots of organizations that are named in honor or memory of a patient or a family. And that's wonderful, and there's lots of families who want to pay their respects and do something in someone's name out of love, and that's absolutely wonderful. But if you want to act on behalf of the entire community, you need to name yourself after the entire community, because you're going to have a harder time finding volunteers or fundraisers within your community, other families, to fundraise with your patient's name when their patient is just as important. Does that make sense? So think bigger. All right, getting down to business. Business licenses. Do you need one for your county? Do you have a location? And most all of us will start out in our living rooms, or on our kitchen table, or in the spare bedroom, or in the garage, or wherever our spouses tell us we can put all our stuff, right? That is going to quickly turn into taking over your entire house. So you need to have a strategic plan for that, where to go. Also, mail. You don't want to put your home address out there on the internet. Don't do it. get a P.O. box. You need to separate everything, and you need some privacy also. A phone number dedicated solely to the organization, and a domain name. When you think of your name, the first thing you need to do is go register your domain name. Make sure no one else has that, because once you start filing those business papers, someone's going to see that you're going to need a domain name, and they're going to scoop it up before you do. So do that very quickly. Marketing. All right, your logo. Our first logo was a cherub, and it was cute. And then we had one that looked kind of scary, and then we had one that looked kind of like kindergarten. So we kind of, we did different things because we couldn't afford to hire a graphic artist. I was the graphic artist. So you can imagine trying to do everything yourself. And then the ribbons became a thing. So our community voted on a ribbon, and we had all these different ideas. And then we decided to use our ribbon on everything. Well, our ribbon had 3 different colors plus white. Do you know how expensive it is to print something with 3 different colors plus white? So I would highly recommend you pick something that's going to age well, that is not trendy, that can be printed in 1 or 2 colors to save you money, and that will look really nice if you make it small and embroidered on a shirt. Your website. I had to learn how to code HTML in 1997 because we couldn't afford to hire a web designer. It was awful. It was the ugliest thing you ever saw. But we were one of the first nonprofits on the internet, so it worked, and families found us. So it did its job. But that's not good enough anymore. Your online presence is often the first thing anyone sees about your organization. So don't get your nephew to do it for free. Don't try to figure out how to code yourself. Don't get a free blog site. Hire someone. Go to a college, get an intern, go to a business, tell them what you're trying to do, make it look professional. Because if you want someone to donate money, they want to go to a website that looks professional and safe. No one wants to put their credit card into something that looks like a 15-year-old built, right? All right, social media. I have a lot to say on social media. We're going to come back to that in a little bit. But you do need to have a social media presence. I started off with leaders organizations in the 90s. When Facebook came along, and Twitter and Instagram, they were old school and they were adamantly against it, and parents could email them, and that's how they get in touch with them and all of that. And they are no longer in business because they did not want to keep up with the times and move in with social media. So you have to keep up. Printed materials are still very important, especially at the hospitals. To have those materials readily available at the time someone is diagnosed is very, very important, especially if your disease is not ultra rare and that you can have those things at the geneticist office or the obstetrician or whoever may diagnose your patients. Trademarks and copyrights, also very important. Just make sure to do it honestly and ethically and trademark or copyright your name or your logo, but not anything that is going to restrict other people in the community from being able to raise awareness or funds or anything else for the disease. For instance, don't trademark cancer awareness or breast cancer awareness or anything that is going to inhibit other people. We had that happen in our community, and it was a very ugly 2-year trademark lawsuit, and it splintered the community right in half because someone trademark congenital diaphragmatic hernia awareness and threatened to sue every other charity who used it. So don't do that. It just make sure that you set up very early on that this is our ribbon, this is our bracelet, this is our color, this is our day, free to use for anyone in the community. Don't try to own awareness. All right, a little bit back about awareness. Pick a day. We all have an awareness day. Just don't make it your patient's birthday or anniversary of their death or something that's ultra personal to you. Make it something that's inclusive of the whole community or your charity, the day that your charity started, or something that makes sense. If your color's green, maybe you want March 17th and wrap it around St. Patrick's Day or something that just is inclusive. Confidentiality agreements are very important when you hire employees and when you bring in volunteers, especially if you're dealing with any type of patient data and HIPAA compliance. You want to make sure that all the information is confidential. Get a lawyer to help draw up a form, have everyone sign it, and if they don't want to sign it, don't bring them on board. You need to cover yourselves and be safe. Non-competes. If you have employees or volunteers who want to come in your organization, ask them to sign a non-compete. We have had instances where we had people want to volunteer. They would come in, get a hold of member list, get a hold of information, see how we ran things, find out our ideas, and then start their own charity 5 minutes later with all of our information and all of our hard work. So a non-compete will help avoid that and will help avoid drama later. Insurance is incredibly important. It's another reason to be incorporated. If something happens to the organization and they get sued, you don't want to personally be liable for anything that goes bad. You want to make sure that you have coverage. You want to make sure that everything will continue to run if something were to happen. In this day and age, it's likely that eventually you will have to deal with some type of legal issue. Renter's insurance, once you grow to get an office, make sure you're covered in insurance in case there's anything that happens. You want to make sure that all your files, your paperwork, your hard drives, everything is backed up and taken care of. Social media drama. All right. I know that most organizations have dealt with this, and our organization definitely has dealt with this. We were one of the first charities on Facebook also, and when Facebook came along, everyone who could start a group or a page thought that they were a nonprofit leader without getting a license or filing with the IRS or following laws or doing anything safe. So suddenly we had a parent or a patient who wanted their own organization and they wanted to take members from ours. The only way they could do that was to trash our organization and pull members to theirs. Same families that we worked to help for years. And I'd like to say that was a one-time thing, but every year we have someone else who goes off the deep end and they know better. They've been in the community for 5 minutes and they know everything and they could do everything better and they don't see what goes on behind the scenes or everything it takes to run an organization. And it splinters and it splinters and it splinters. And I'm mentioning this because I know it has happened to quite a few people in this room, and I just want to tell you it's not you. It's not you. You're not doing a bad job. This happens with every single cause. And if it hasn't happened to you yet, God bless you, it will. Startup capital. We started on $100 that my son's surgeon donated, and that paid for stamps. Back in the day where stamps were a lot cheaper. That was ridiculous at the time. I mean, it got us, our first foothold to start things, but now you really need capital. You need money to start with. You need money to hire the web designer, to get the domain name, to get the business, cards printed, to get your logo designed. You need capital. So think about that before you start. And there's nothing wrong with planning long term before you crank the engine and get going. Grassroots fundraisers. We have done everything from bake sales to yard sales to jumping 4 stories into big air mattresses to anything that we could think of to raise money. When you do those, make sure you're covered. Make sure your insurance covers these things because you don't want something happening to someone and then you're liable. Selling products. Make sure that anything you sell is original. You're not infringing upon anyone else's trademark or copyrights. And make sure you're providing things that people want. We had a store with like 500 items. You know how many things the families wanted? 5. That was it. I spent weeks and months designing things no one ever bought. It was a complete waste of time. So listen to the families and find out what will sell and what they're looking for. Grant writing. This is the biggest thing that will keep your organization going and keep your organization growing. If you don't know how to write grants and you're about to start an organization, sign up for a course, go to the college, figure out how to do it, go online, find a volunteer, ask any of your patients if they know how to do it. Get a grant writer immediately. Hiring fundraisers. Now this one's a little bit tricky because every state has different laws on hiring fundraisers. In the state that I live in North Carolina, we can't hire fundraisers unless they are licensed and bonded. And then we have to watch what percentage we give them because if they're raising $100 and they're taking $50, well, to an organization, we're like, hey, that's $50 more than we would have had, right? To the public, that's 50% overhead, and you're evil, and that's wrong. And it's a big deal. It's a really big deal. So be very, very careful about hiring fundraisers and do your homework and make sure you're following laws. Online fundraising, I don't know if you guys know this, but if you raise money in other states online, you have to be licensed in that state as well. So there's a nice booth over in the vendor section. We'll explain all that to you. So make sure to talk to them if you did not know that. CFC and United Way are a great way to raise money when you're established after a couple of years. We already talked about that one. And get creative. I often tell the parents, and this is where I told you, I warned you I was blunt and I'd have no filter. I tell the parents that I'm willing to do anything as long as it does not involve heights or nudity. And I mean that because we have such a hard time raising awareness. I mean, before I said congenital diaphragmatic hernia, I think there's probably one other person in the room who may have known what that was. It is as common as spina bifida and cystic fibrosis. It is on the common end to rare. And we have a very hard time raising awareness. So we get very creative to try to do that. And you have to in this sector. You have to get creative because most of us have no money to hire people to do it. And so you have to think out of the box, do online challenges. I mean, look what ALS did. It was incredible. You know, that's absolutely getting creative and thinking outside the box. Membership dues. If this is something that you think you're going to do in your organization, do it from the very start. Do it from the very beginning when you start, because you will never be able to implement it later because someone else will start a free competing organization where no one has to pay. So if you have services, information, things that you can offer patients and families, go ahead and set up those dues and set precedent. Working with researchers and conducting research. You're going to hear throughout this entire conference how important it is to have a natural history database of patients and how important it is to work with pharma and how amazing it can be for a disease or a birth defect or any medical condition to have that research team on your side. So I'm not going to repeat everything that you're going to hear in every other lecture, but just pay attention. I mean, for a lot of us, this is why we started. We wanted to have the research. We wanted to have something to stop whatever we were dealing with or to cure whatever we were dealing with. So it's incredibly important. Just make sure that you don't align yourself with just one. Work with as many as possible. Be very upfront with the families, what you're doing with the research, involve them in decision making, and make a plan. You know, what are your goals? What do you want to have accomplished in 3, 4, 5, 10, 20 years, and start with that. Working with pharmaceutical companies, you know, that's kind of a tightrope walk to try to figure out, you know, what is ethical and what is not ethical and how to navigate that. And I'm not the person to give that speech. There are other people who will be doing that, so make sure to listen to them. Playing fairly with other nonprofits. Well, you're all here. You're all working with other nonprofits because you're here. So that kudos to you because it's a great thing. Because it's incredibly important to work together with like organizations to have a larger voice. Because being a rare disease or a birth defect, our voices are so incredibly small, and we've done amazing things working together, but also work with other nonprofits that are similar to your disease, or if there are already nonprofits dealing with your disease, make sure you're on the same page and you work together and not against each other. Treating patients and families with respect. There will be days when that's going to be very hard when they're calling you at 2 o'clock in the morning to ask you a ridiculous question like, what's the password to get into the website? But you have to always, always be professional and always see things from their eyes. And when you're a nonprofit leader, you're going to find, if you haven't already, that you're no longer a patient, or you're no longer a parent, you're no longer a family member, you're in a job role. So you have to make sure that you can empathize with them, but you have to also not be a person, for lack of a better term, because they need you, and you're the one that they're looking to. Kind of like if your mom in the family, the kids see you melt down every day, you're not going to be any help to the kids. So you just have to be the person they come to and always treat them with respect and honor. Medical advice and referrals. Unless you're a physician, you should never give medical advice to any of your patients. You should never tell them a therapy they should do, a treatment they should have, a drug they should use. You should never tell them it's okay to trade drugs or trade equipment or trade medical advice because you're liable. So employees and volunteers, define the roles very early on when you set up the organization. What is the president going to do? How many board members are you going to have? What's the secretary's responsibilities? What are the deadlines? How often are you going to be having board meetings? Learn how to delegate so that you're not doing everything yourself. And this goes back to making sure you have the support to start an organization. Hold people accountable. It's really easy when you have volunteers to go, well, they're not getting paid to do this. They're volunteering with their time, and I'm really grateful and thankful for their help. But if they're supposed to do 10 things and they only do one, guess who's going to do those 9 other things? Or they're not going to get done. And those 9 other things are probably really important to your organization. So make sure that you're only giving people duties that they can handle, or that you're delegating them fairly, or replace them. And that sounds awful, but things, patients are depending on you, so you really need a good team behind you. Seek out qualified people as if you're running a business. If you have a patient's parent who is an accountant by trade and they want to be on your board and they want to be the secretary, that's great. They know what they're doing. They have the experience. But if you have someone else who used to do the books for the PTA group, that's, pick the accountant who's certified. Make sure that you pick the right people. Thank your volunteers. They do have their own responsibilities. They do have patients they're taking care of. They often also have jobs and other kids, and it is a huge honor to be able to have a little bit of their time for your organization and the cause. So make sure to thank them. And if you have employees, make sure that you reward them, pay them well, because as many of you know, it's very hard to find good employees in the nonprofit sector. So, because all of us want them. We all want the great fundraiser and the grant writer, and so if you have someone who's good, hold on to them. And the dark side of running a nonprofit. Okay, this is where I'm super blunt, and please know that there are many, many wonderful things to starting a nonprofit. Mainly, you're helping your cause, you're helping patients, you're helping someone you love, you're helping yourself. There are great, wonderful reasons to start a nonprofit, but these are the things no one told me that I was completely blindsided by that I want to let you all know. That you will be living under a microscope if you're the leader of a nonprofit. Your job, the house you live in, the car you drive, what you do, everything is going to be under a microscope because everybody's going to want to know, well, are they getting paid for this job? Or is all the money accounted for? Or, who are they friends with on Facebook? What's their political affiliation? Every single thing you do is going to be under a microscope, especially on social media. And not everyone's going to agree with you. So that can be a little hard to handle, which I had no idea that was a thing. And I'm a very sensitive person. Well, I was 20 years ago. And it crushed me. It crushed me when that first started happening. Learning to say no. You can't do everything for a cause. You're human, and you have a life and a family, and many of you also have other jobs. And okay, so learn to say no. And I talk too much, so I need to speed through the rest of these. We already talked about social media and competing charities, and make sure that you have a lot of employees and not a lot of leaders. Set goals, annual budgets, stay focused. Don't get distracted by smaller things. Delegate, evolve, and grow. And that's it. And it was a lot, and I'm happy to answer questions later.
To hear from Christina now, and we are getting some questions coming through, so once Christina's done, we'll go through some of the questions that have come up. And again, don't forget, there is the Q&A on the mobile app. Thanks.
Good afternoon. Can everybody hear me all right? Okay. I first want to my name's Christina Gomez. I am an assistant vice president at CCS Fundraising. CCS Fundraising is a fundraising consultancy. We work with nonprofits all across the country and in the UK and Ireland to help them on their fundraising strategies and a bunch of other things. Before I begin my part of the presentation, I want to take a quick survey of the room. I want you to raise your hand if you are thinking of starting a nonprofit. You haven't started one yet, but you're thinking about it. Raise your hand so I can see who's in the room. Okay. Raise your hand if you've started a nonprofit, but you've been in operation for less than 5 years. Okay. Raise your hand if you've started a nonprofit and you have 5+ years of experience. Great. Okay, second round of questions. Raise your hand if you are a CEO, an executive director, or a founder of this nonprofit. Okay, raise your hand if you're on the development team, a fundraiser. Good to have my fundraisers in the room. Raise your hand if you're program staff. Okay. Does somebody raise their hand for everything? Because that's what beginning a nonprofit's all about, wearing a lot of hats. Okay, great. Thank you for sharing that information with me. It's really helpful to know who's in the room. Dawn covered this really wonderfully. Before you start your organization, or as you're starting your organization, you have to think about the why. Why do you exist? Because if you can't communicate this why, you're not going to recruit anybody, you're not going to raise any money, you're not going to even have clear messaging to put together any materials. So think carefully about your why. What's the message? What's the story that you're going to share? What are you going to communicate? Also think about if you should exist. I know that sounds a little bit harsh, but there are 1.5 million nonprofit organizations in the country. That's 1.5 million organizations competing for talent, competing for leadership, competing for dollars, competing for eyeballs on social media and on websites. Do you need to exist? Ask yourself that question. There are other ways to accomplish your goals without forming a nonprofit. Maybe you can partner with an existing nonprofit that does similar work to you and you can sort of lead a project with them. In that case, you get to do what you want to do and maybe focus more specifically while that nonprofit partner takes care of all of the administrative back-end work that you probably don't want to do anyway, right? Maybe. The other option is consider fiscal sponsorship. If you don't know what fiscal sponsorship is, you should write that down and look it up. It's a great idea. We hear about it more and more. If you're from Southern California, there are organizations, or you're from California, there are organizations like the California Community Foundation or the Silicon Valley Community Foundation, and these large community foundations take projects, take startup organizations like yours under their wing. They give you the benefit of working with their governing board, of running your finances, of doing your HR work. You don't have to do any of that, and you can focus on your mission. There are some, intricacies involved in handling money and how that money is filtered, donations filtered through their offices and to you. But if you're really just focused on serving an issue or serving your need, and you're not really concerned about whether you're the leader of a formal nonprofit and you don't really want to put a board together and you don't really want to deal with HR or hiring, consider fiscal sponsorship. It can really be a great way to still do the work you want to do and not have to take on that extra burden. So let's say you've thought through all of the reasons why you should exist and you still want to move forward. I'm not here to give you legal advice. I'm a fundraiser. I'm not an attorney. I want to give you a list of things to think about, to talk to your attorney about. 501c3s, we hear about them all the time, but there are several kinds of nonprofits. I've put their names up on the screen. The differences between each of these nonprofits have a lot to do with donation tax deductibility and the purpose for your organization existing. There are 501c6s and 501c7s who are like social clubs or unions. If you're not really sure how your organization is going to be best categorized, look these up, consult an attorney, and make sure you're filing the right paperwork. We hear about 501c3 a lot. Just make sure it's the right fit for you. 501c4s, I'll tell you briefly, do a little more advocacy work and work on the Hill, work with politicians. And if you're just a 501c3, there are limits to what you're able to do. So if being on the Hill is important to you, make sure that you're looking up those differences. The necessary organizing documents. Again, I'm not an attorney. I want to give you a list of things to talk to your attorney about, but you want articles of incorporation. They're public documents that tell the public who you are, who your board of governors are, or who your board of directors are, and then you want to make sure that you're confirming the right tax-exempt status. You're going to need all of that information. Once you figure out your 501c situation, you want to consult your attorney and make sure that you're putting forward all the right documentation. You don't need an attorney to do the research. If you're on a tighter budget and you have the time, it's a little more tedious, it is more work, but you can spend your time looking on BoardSource or various confirmed, sort of trusted nonprofit resources and find a lot of this information. BoardSource is one that comes to mind immediately, but if you Google, fiscal sponsorship, publications and periodicals that write in their businesses nonprofit writing will come up right away. So you'll start to recognize them pretty regularly, and a lot of this information is available to you online. So if you want to maximize your hourly fee with your attorney, spend a little time doing research before talking to them about what you want to do. So now the stuff I really love. So that was, your to-do list. Get attorney, research some stuff, make sure you know what 501c status you want to be. I want to talk about fundraising now, because that's what I do all day long, every day. Believe it or not, I love it. I know people don't initially love fundraising, but it can be really, really rewarding. There are 4 operating principles that you need to consider when organizing your nonprofit, and they're listed on the screen: case, leadership, prospects, and plan. Case, and I'm sorry the font is not the greatest color for you, but I think these slides will be made available to you so you can look at them on the back end. So let's start with case. They're on the app already. Thank you so much on it. Your case statement, your case document, this is the why, right? If you have a clear idea of why you exist and how you got to that point, putting together this case statement is going to be really fulfilling, right? You're going to be able to put all the reasons why you created this organization on one document. And really writing a thorough case document, putting together a thorough case statement is in your best interest. This can be a 5-page document, a 10-page document, sort of like, it can be your manifesto. Leave it all on the line, right? Put it all on this document. And I'll tell you why. You want to put mission and vision on there, certainly, definitely, absolutely, 100%, right? The other things on there, your organizational history and evaluation. How did you come to this place that you needed to form a nonprofit, that the cause was so great that the answer that you were going to provide is forming a nonprofit? What is the issue that you're addressing? How did you get to this point, and where are you going to go in the future? What are the challenges that you're going to foresee? Not as a nonprofit, but as a nonprofit that's addressing a specific issue. What is the issue in cancer research? What is the issue with whatever pharmacological issue that you're addressing, right? What are the challenges? What are you trying to achieve? What's your plan to meet those needs, to address those challenges? Why do you exist? Somebody who is reading this needs to understand after reading it who you are, where you've been, why you're here, what you're going to do. The more time you spend thinking about this pretty clearly, thoroughly, and putting it on paper, the better off you're going to be, because your case document is going to be the basis for every single thing you do afterwards. Putting together a job description, your mission, your vision, your challenges are all in this document. Putting together a grant proposal, your goals are in this document. The language that you've thought painstakingly about, what the words that reflect what you're trying to do and how you're trying to do it and the values of your organization, you've spent time turning these words over in your head. That's why you put them in this document. So when somebody goes to write a grant for you, or you're writing a grant yourself, it's already there. This document turns into a lot of other documents. It turns into your website. It turns into the tone that your website sends. It turns into your written materials. It turns into your proposals. It turns into a lot of things. I know I'm spending a lot of time talking about case document because it is that important. Take the time to think thoroughly about all of these elements and putting them in a case document, because when you get to the point where you're hiring staff and you can start to delegate responsibilities, or even if you have staff right now, you're not going to have to sit with somebody and say, these are the words I want you to use when you describe what we're doing. These are the goals that I want you to focus on, because it's going to be all in the document. It came from your brain as the founder, the CEO, the ED, the development director, onto this document. And they can more effectively and efficiently do that work for you so that you can just review it, right? If you get your team working from the case document, not only you're using the same language, you're certain that you're using the same language, you're just maximizing efficiencies, right? Case document. Leadership. I think about leadership in a lot of different ways. Who's your internal leadership? You as an executive director, CEO, founder. Who else? I put some common sort of positions that I find in executive circles: your program lead, your head fundraiser, your finance person. If you're wearing all of these hats, then you're wearing all of these hats and you're trying to get some people to fill these roles. Who's your internal leadership? Who are you going to bounce ideas off of? Who are you working on strategic plans together? Think about who those people are, and what your plans are to recruit those people. There are templated job descriptions for all of these roles, and part of what this conference is about is certainly networking. So if you meet somebody here today who's doing similar work to you're doing, follow up with them. Do you have a job description for this role that you've filled, or have you thought about what you're requiring this person to do so you can look at that also? Advisory and governance boards. So advisory and governance boards are two different things, or they can be two different things. Your governing board has fiduciary responsibility to your organization. They're helping you with the budget. They're making sure you stay on budget. They're helping you with the strategic plan. They're the ones that are listed in your articles of incorporation. And they're there, as Dawn referenced, it's a good idea here to think about, what do I need as an organization? Do I need an attorney? Do I need a CPA? Do I need a medical professional? Do I need somebody who's living the issue that I'm addressing? Get representation from all of those key constituencies on your board, because then you can think holistically about how you're addressing the issue, right? Dawn mentioned being inclusive. This is a great area to be inclusive. The people on your governing board are likely volunteers, right? Their service to you is saying, what's your name? Robert. Robert, this budget looks great. I would change these couple things for free, right? That's the advice they're giving to you for free. The person who's your fundraising expert, Carly, is saying, this 3-year fundraising plan looks amazing. I think we can raise more money from individuals between year 2 and year 3, right? That is their job, to help you think about the strategic plan and how you need to tweak it to make sense for the organization. Advisory boards. So I'll switch to that a little bit. I love advisory boards because it's likely that each of you has a very expansive network. There are people who are probably itching to be on your governing board. They don't all need to be there. And they don't all have the credentials to be there. Those are selective leaders that you need to think about carefully, because you need to leverage their experience and their expertise. If there are other people you want to engage, think about an advisory board. Not in this sector specifically, but I have a friend who runs an education nonprofit, and he had, a whole cabinet of people that wanted to be involved with his organization. It wasn't appropriate to put them all on the governing board because he didn't need 3 CPAs. He didn't need 4 lawyers. But what he needed was people to think critically about the curriculum that they were developing. So he brought in 5 teachers, a couple principals, some retired special ed professionals to focus only on curriculum development for their organization. So there's a specific issue, a specific task that you want to put some leaders behind. Thinking about an advisory board where they don't have fiduciary responsibility to your organization, but it's still a great way to engage them, can be really beneficial to you in that you're getting their expertise, but it's also beneficial to you in that you're engaging them. You're engaging people and sort of testing them. It gives you an opportunity to test to see if it's appropriate for them to serve on your governing board next year or in 2 years. I like to think of advisory boards as testing grounds, proving grounds, right? That's how I like to use them. Like advisory boards, volunteer committees, maybe there's a project that has a finite time frame. Maybe there's a special event. Maybe there's a capital campaign. Maybe there's a communications campaign that you want to put some select minds behind. Pull together a special committee, a task force, or a brain trust to focus on that specific issue. I see this a lot when organizations want to start a capital campaign, right? They've existed in an office that they've been renting. They want to build their own building, but before they launch into a multi-million-dollar capital campaign, they want to make sure that their constituencies support them, that they think this is a good idea, that there's enough buy-in in their community to support them through a capital campaign. So they put together a feasibility study committee. That feasibility study committee oversees the execution of a feasibility study, testing the ideas of the goals of the projects, and comes back to them and says, we talked to X amount of people, this is what they think about your idea, you can move forward, you cannot move forward. Again, special committees are great ways to engage people who aren't yet ready or don't have the expertise to be super useful to you in a governing capacity, but you still want to engage them. And as a fundraiser, these are great spaces to hook people, to bring people closer to the organization, to get them involved so that you can leverage their expertise later. Prospects. This is what I call the list. It is the list of supporters, donors, people, volunteers, committee members, community leaders who you want to go to for financial support for your organization. If you're just starting out and you've not filed for your 501c3, C4 status, you probably don't have a super long list going. You should start to put that list together. And I don't want to speak in ambiguous terms. Open an Excel document, name the columns, first name, last name, address, email, phone number, and start to fill in everything that you know about the people you want to go to. It starts there. If you're starting off, you don't have a strong list going, at every event, at every fundraiser, there's a sign-in sheet that asks that same information, and you're constantly collecting that data. There are no quick fixes. There are no easy ways to do this. It just takes time and hard work and diligence and pulling these lists together. Everybody that you meet, everybody that you talk to is going on this list. Let's say you use this list to send out some sort of communication, like newsletter communication. There's an opt-out version. There's an opt-out button at the bottom. If they don't want to receive that communication from you, they will opt themselves out. Don't worry about adding people to the list because you need to build your donor base. You need to build the base of people who you can go to for financial support and for potential volunteer opportunities. If you're an organization that's been in existence for a while, you likely have a good list going. You keep building that list. You need to think carefully about how you're leveraging the people on that list. Rating systems, ABC, on the slide. In that same Excel document, as you think about the most efficient way to go about asking the people on that list for contributions, what we like to do as fundraisers, because it's efficient and effective, is implement a rating system. I've seen 1, 2, 3 rating systems. I use an ABC rating system. All it means is you rate the people on that list to help you focus your time. So let me talk about ABC because that's the one I use the most. C stands for cultivate. If there are people on your list who aren't super close to your organization, you need to do a lot of engagement with them. They're certainly not ready to be asked for money. Label them a C. Label all those people C. If there are people who know about your organization, who you can sit down and talk to them and share with them about your strategic goals and your vision, and you can have a conversation about what it is that you're doing, you're just not spitting stuff out at them, that's your brief. That's what B stands for. Somebody is ready to be briefed about your organization, about your goals, about where you're headed. A stands for ask. This is somebody who's very either familiar with the work or supportive of you or other people on your staff, believe wholeheartedly in the work that you're doing, and they're ready to be asked for money. You label those people A. So when you're thinking about making the most of your time, you're just focusing on A's and moving C's to B's, B's to A's, and then getting those A's off the list so that you can continue to focus moving the B's to the A's. Does that make sense? Okay. I think that's enough of that. This is a constituency model. When you think about the donors who are in your circle, you want to think about who are the most engaged and focus your energies there. Your management, your donors, your board members are the people that are going to be closest to your organization. They get it. They don't need a lot of convincing. Start your fundraising there, right? Because you don't need to do a lot of explaining or selling. Those are people who know what you're doing. You want to spend most immediately your focus time on the inner circles and then work your way out. As you work your way out on this circle, on these concentric circles, the communications start to be a little less personal and a little more broad. And that's not to sort of disregard somebody's capacity to be really engaged with you. It really is just a realistic measure of what you have time to do. And as people move from C's to B's to A's on your prospect list, on your rating sheet, they will get different kinds of communication. But you want to think about the different people who are on your list in this circle and how you're going to engage them and develop strategies for every single one of them, especially your A's and your B's. Plan. So this is the last slide, and then I think we're going to take questions. Plan is your strategic plan. While you're waiting for your 501c, your tax-exempt status to be approved, you want to be thinking about all of these things. And you need to think about your strategic plan. Where are you today? Where do you want to be in a year? Where do you want to be in 3 years? Where do you want to be in 5 years? I know this can sound daunting, but if you start to fill out an Excel document that has those benchmarks, you start to fill in the tasks that you need to accomplish to reach those benchmarks and just start to break it down. You'll have a clearer idea of what your year is going to look like, what you need to accomplish as an organizational leader to make sure that you've raised the money that you want to raise for next year. There are two words or two documents that are named at the top of this slide: theory of change and logic model. This is part of your narrative. What is your theory of change? It's basically another version of your why. Why do you exist? Why do you exist? What are you doing that is going to change the narrative about the issue that you're addressing? How is your organization moving the needle? The theory of change says, I, Dave, believe that my organization is going to change the landscape for this disease by doing X, Y, Z, right? That's your theory of change. Your logic model is the biggest piece of your strategic plan and is basically, to accomplish X, Y, Z, I need to do this task, this task, this task, and this task. The tasks for every one of your goals. And then you break it down further. To accomplish that task, I need to talk to this person, I need to collect this information, it needs to be on this timeline. You put all of that together in a strategic plan, you've got your plan for a year, and you've got a vision for 3 years and 5 years, right? And it's not set in concrete. It's something that you come to time and time again to tweak and make sure you're staying the course. Like your case document. Having this document exist frees you up to do the leadership that you need to do and provide the staff, your staff, with a strategic plan saying, when we had our strategic planning meeting, these were the goals for fundraising. You as the fundraising lead need to accomplish these goals. We'll revisit them weekly, monthly, quarterly, annually. But basically, this is your responsibility, right? It makes sure, like the case document, that everybody is on the same page, everybody is speaking the same language, and everybody has their marching orders when you leave your annual retreat. I've worked with a lot of people who are starting their nonprofits, and they totally bypass the theory of change and the logic model, and then they've come to me later saying, hey, can you help me with this grant? I have no idea what your goals are. I have no idea what your programs are. I have no idea, what your vision for board diversity is, because you've not taken the time to write it down. So if you're going to engage people with your organization, make sure that these key organizational documents are in place. Not only does it force you as a leader to think carefully about what you want to do and why you want to do it and how you're going to do it, it gives people your approved language on how to communicate what it is that you're going to do. That's it.
Thanks, Christina. Thanks, Dawn. We're going to take some questions. I'll do a couple questions from the room, and then we have several questions that have come across through the mobile app. Any questions in the room here? All right. Well, here.
Hi. First of all, thank you. That was excellent. Very informative from both of you. I wanted to find out in regards to those you gave the letter designation to and the A's that move off the list. How do you reapproach those A's who've given? Is there a time frame you should allow for? And what method do you use to try to have them donate again?
Sure, that's a really great question. We say that fundraising is both a science and an art, right? You create a fundraising plan for the annual needs of your organization. And you think, okay, if I want to raise $100,000, I need one donor to give me $50,000. I need another donor to give me $25,000. I need another donor, maybe two donors, to give me $10,000 each. What are the combination of nice round gift levels that are going to add up to $100,000 or whatever your organizational need is, right? You want to pair those needs with the appropriate people on your prospect list. You spend time cultivating them. You ask them for a request. That is their annual contribution, right? If you have a situation where you need to go back to that person, I think you need to think carefully about what's the opportunity cost of going back to that person for a second ask. The art part of fundraising is sort of like the gut feeling, right? What's your gut feeling about going back to this person to ask them for more money? Are they going to be upset by it? Do they have the financial resources, what we call capacity? Do they have the capacity to give you a much larger gift than $50,000? So it's not a question of capacity, it's a question of messaging. I know we talked about your $50,000 contribution helping our organization address XYZ. We've just received this incredible opportunity to do X, and I want to bring you into this conversation. Maybe it's not a request that you make right away, but part of a conversation that you engage your donor with. So I would say that you should try not to go back to donors more than once a year, but if you have to, think about engaging them in a more strategic way than just going after the dollars.
Great. Well, we always like to have the mic, though. Oh, you got. Oh.
Hi, this is kind of a silly question, but I wanted to ask about fundraising. So we are a small community organization, and we're in the New England area, and we have a lot of buy-in from our community, and we do one big fundraiser every year. And the cost is a bit prohibitive for some people, yet our idea is that it's a fundraiser, so we need to make money. Do you have any advice to bring other people into the fold? And I think it's by doing smaller events that are less about fundraising, more about community building, yet make them feel like, so kind of that other tier of people who can't pay hundreds of dollars for a ticket might do something smaller. How do we engage those people, make them feel like they're part of the organization, as opposed to limiting them from the fundraiser, because we do need people to spend more money? I mean, I'm trying to figure out how to engage the rest of the community.
Sure, I'll say a little bit, and then Dawn, I don't know if you want to speak from personal experience about this, but coming back to what do you need? What gift levels do you need throughout the year to get you to your goal? If you need 10 gifts of $1,000 or 100 gifts of $50, right? You think about work backwards, right? At the end of the year, I need to have accomplished X. To accomplish X, I can implement these 4 different strategies. One is an annual gala where it's a high ticket item. The next is a lunch and learn where somebody is your host. Maybe one of your board members hosts a small lunch at their home or through their connections in the community at a restaurant, and the ticket price is a little bit lower. And then maybe there's a barbecue that you host. This is your opportunity to be creative. I will tell everybody in this room, this is like Fundraiser's Bible. Your biggest return on investment in terms of your effort as a leader is going to be individual gifts. A lot of you are going to start off with a lot of foundation grants, and some of your initial inclinations are going to be, let's go after that corporate money. I'm telling you that corporations don't give a lot of money. It's very time intensive. And if you look at the whole fundraising landscape, 70%, not including bequests, if you add bequests, it's like goes up to nearly 80%, maybe a little bit more, of all fundraising comes from individual people. The next is 15% from foundations and then less than 10% from corporations. So think about how that applies to your fundraising. I'm glad.
Great. Dawn, any questions on that or comments?
let's see, it's working. Okay. I would just add that you're gonna have various types of people in every organization. You're gonna have the people who want to get dressed up for the gala, the people who are going to want to go bowling, and one type of person does not reflect the amount of money that they can give. So the more things that you have, more opportunities in diverse events, I think the better. Don't just focus on trying to be affordable to everyone when their tastes can be completely different too.
I agree. I think you need to calendar it out, because what you don't want to do is get caught doing 50 lunch and learns and raising just as much money if you would have focused your time on the middle circle, your A prospects, and done, a gala that maybe cost a little bit more money. So you have to weigh the pros and cons, right?
Great. We have a couple we are going to go about 5 minutes over because we started 5 minutes late, so just to let everybody know. We have a question that says, our foundation operates out of a community foundation with no board, bylaws, or nonprofit structure. Decisions are all top-down, including who and what gets funding. How should patients deal with this? Thoughts? Sounds like an
Mutiny?
autocrat.
I don't know.
Oh, there's an autocrat in here somewhere, right?
I'm not sure of the question. So the patients aren't being asked, they're not being involved in the process at all.
Right. There's no board, no bylaws. It sounds like it's.
Is that an actual organization?
Well, it says it appears so. Any thoughts?
Well, it doesn't sound like a
Begin
registered
anew?
non-profit. Yes, begin anew. Go.
Sure. It says our foundation operates out of a community foundation. So it operates out of a community foundation with no board, bylaws, or nonprofit structure, which is sort of against some of the guidelines you both gave. Decisions are all top-down, so I'm assuming from the very top, including who and what gets funding. So out of that community board, that the person decides who and what gets funding. And so how should patients deal with this? So it sounds like maybe somebody is not getting sort of their voice heard.
It doesn't sound like that structure is working. And so it's time to have a very tough conversation or to start something different. If it's not helping the community, then there's really no need for existence.
Goes to maybe that brain trust.
Right. Well, what I was going to say is it sort of sounds to me like there might be some like a fiscal sponsorship situation where they work under the community foundation, and maybe the nonprofit that works under the community foundation doesn't have a board because the fiscal sponsor does. If that's the case, it's about building relationships, right? Who are the people that are making the decisions in the governing structure that you can invite to your next event, that you can take out for a coffee, that you can start to build a relationship with? Because if the decisions are top down, then you need to know the people at the top.
Great. Another question is, what would be the biggest red flags to negative people who shouldn't serve on the NPO board? Do we do a point background check? Are those necessary to do on the people to join the board? So it sounds like a negative person. There may be some negative people. How do you deal with that?
References before they join the board. Find out experiences they've had beforehand. And are they going to contribute? Are they going to be people who actually have ideas or information or a network they can contribute? Or are they going to be the ones who are going to judge everyone else's ideas and hold the board back? So you do your due diligence before you add them.
How about if they're already on? You remember one of your slides, Dawn, you had said that if the you have to keep a positive attitude. What happens if somebody sort of goes to the dark side and is a little bit negative? How should that be dealt with?
By a vote to get rid of them.
Hopefully you have some
Is
bylaws.
that called the gangplank?
Yeah, hopefully you have some bylaws in place that sort of outline what it means to be a board member. And
It's a good idea.
that can be like, your job as a board member is to make our organization a top philanthropic priority. We would hope that you would help us give or get $5,000 a year, $10,000 a year. What's that financial request? Make them responsible to something. and that you would be an advocate for us and a cheerleader, right? Those are sort of like vague terms that basically say, you need to be on our side. You need to be our person in the community that's singing our praises and bringing other people to the fold. If your board members are not doing what their job description says that they should be doing, then it's time for a conversation. They're hard conversations, but you need to sort of like suss out, why is this person behaving this way? Because chances are it might not have anything to do with what the organization is actually doing. Maybe there's somebody else on the board that they're unhappy with. Maybe they had an idea that you didn't hear, or they sent you an email that you didn't see. Get to the bottom of it, right? Have a conversation. With fundraising and organizational sort of operations and development, it's all about managing those relationships. So somebody is not acting out of turn just because, right? You need to find out the reason, and once you have that information, you can make a better and more informed decision. If your bylaws have term limits for your board members, and they should all have term limits, then that's going to give you some leverage, right? So is that job description. So make sure you have those in your bylaws. I'm working with an organization now whose their executive is I feel for her. She's telling me that she's had these people on her board for 10 years, but they're not doing anything. They're not helping at events. They're not recruiting people. They're not introducing her to people, and they're not even fulfilling their annual contribution. And I said to her, well, why are they there? And she says, well, they can't be kicked off because they have no term limits.
Good suggestion. One more question before we end. If two nonprofits exist for the same rare disease but have different focus, do you have any advice how to get the two groups to work together, communicate, coexist? Any thoughts?
Different focus or different projects? And
Well, it says differences in their focus, but it's the same rare disease.
Okay, well, there's nothing wrong with having 5 nonprofits if all 5 nonprofits are focused on something else. One is,
How do you get them to maybe work together?
well, within our cause, we have about 30 different organizations, different sizes, and everyone was focused on different things. So we have formed an alliance. We brought the leaders all together. We sat them down and said, what are you providing? What are we providing? Let's not duplicate services. Let's not waste resources. Everyone provides a different piece to the puzzle. Everyone works together and supports each other. And there are definite ways to do that as long as it's not a personality conflict. But even so, you can always find someone else on the board that you can sit down and meet with, because it's extremely important for the community, for all the nonprofits to work together as positively as possible, and the leaders should understand that.
Great advice. The alliance and all. I will check with Global Genes about, there are a few more questions that came up, how we can sort of get those answered. I do want to, if everybody could give a round of applause to Dawn and Christina. I thought they gave excellent presentation and advice. And I do want to remind everybody, there is a survey on the mobile app. If you could make sure you fill that out. This helps us understand what we've done well and what we need to improve. So next up is lunch. Thank you, El Nilam, for sponsoring that. And the next session will begin at 2 p.m. Thank you.